Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon, alcoholic.
Hi, Shannon.
And thank you, Steve, for asking me to be here tonight. And Nancy. Um, yeah, we go way back. And it's always nice to see you, both of you. And I just appreciate this opportunity. I've been to Seattle Intergroup several times. I've never been to this meeting. So thanks for having me, and thank you for the cake. It was delicious. My sobriety date is February 3rd, 2021. However, uh, I first entered the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous December 15th, 1991. So it's taken me that long to tell you that I am 100% an alcoholic of body, mind, and spirit. And in this moment, I can also say with confidence that I'm a recovered alcoholic, that I am sane around alcohol in this moment. And that's only by the grace of God and by being asked to do things like this, by having a sponsor in a home group. Our home group is Tuesday Night Special. We meet at 6 o'clock in Ravenna. And it's just a really smart meeting, I feel, because it's right, very convenient for me. It's right in the middle of where I work and where I live. And that's really why I joined. I have, I'm really, my life is super busy today. I'm a mom. I have two kids, one who just turned 15, one who will turn 13 this year, a boy and a girl. And I'm married and happily married to a really great guy. And they support me. They know I'm here speaking at a podium. In fact, when I was getting ready, my daughter, we were just kind of chatting. And I said, Carolyn's on her way and we're going to drive together. And she was like, Carolyn, the really nice one, Carolyn. And I was like, yeah, the really nice one. She brings them cake and sweets and just loves up our family. And she was like, wow, she's speaking with you. And I was like, yeah, we're both speaking. And she's going to talk for 15 minutes and I'm going to somehow fill 30. And she was like, 30 minutes? What are you going to talk about? I'm like, I don't know. It feels like a long time. But I'm sure we'll find some things to talk about. And it really, I could have listened to you, Carolyn, the whole time. It's such an interesting, such a great, amazing life that you've lived. And it's really, it baffles me because it's so opposite of how I was raised. And there's really no answer to that, right? It's like, we're both here. I know we've been in the book together. So I know that we both suffer from the same, disease. And, but yet you were raised without alcohol, not a drop, and I was raised with a lot of alcohol. Alcohol in our family was the solution. Growing up, I'm sure for generations and generations, it didn't stop there, I feel like it was just embedded in my family to drink. I mean, I remember being a kid and hearing I was raised in San Diego. So I'm originally from San Diego, California. But I consider myself a Seattleite because I've been here since the 90s and I was here with the Kingdom. Watched it come down. So I remember Seattle. I love Seattle. And I love San Diego. And both have play a huge part in my life. But I was raised in San Diego, and for fun, our family growing up, we would go to the desert. And all of our family members would come. It was like aunts and uncles and grandparents and cousins, and they all had RVs and tents and off-road vehicles. We were always off-road racing and being by fires. And at night, around the campfire would start. And I remember just being a kid and not being able to sleep because I could hear the chatter of the adults outside, and they would sing this song. and it's kamikaze time. It's kamikaze time. And I was like, what? I'm like 3-4 years old, and I'm just like, it's kamikaze time. And I was just that kid that was always getting out of the tent and always getting out of bed to come and be with the adults and be in the party. And the story goes that, my grandpa, Paka, who his name's George, and oh my gosh, he was awesome. The man drank, he drank more. It was Paka and rum and Coke. And just, the constant, that sound of those ice cubes with the glass. And so he thought it was a great time, and that, hey, she's not going to bed. So gave me a kamikaze. That was my first drink that I can remember. And after that, I'm not really sure. I think I went right to bed. And so, that was just the way it went. That was my family. it was just in the DNA of my family just to drink. And I remember, like, if I had a toothache, and I was little, my mom would put a little alcohol in my gums and I'd fall right asleep. Or, that was, there's so many examples of that. And so, yeah, some people might think, well, of course you're going to be an alcoholic. But I know a lot of people too that have experiences like that, and they just don't end up here at the podium, in AA. So there's really, I can't get caught up in the why. But I am me, and I suffer from a disease of both mind and body. And when I put some alcohol in, I don't have I don't have a shutoff valve. There's nothing in me that I can do that will guarantee stopping, no matter how great the necessity or the wish. The book says that, right? It's the mental obsession is that even when I don't have alcohol in, I'm constantly thinking about how I'm going to get it in, and how I'm not going to get it in, and how you think I'm going to get it in, and how you think I'm not going to get it in, and how I think you think how I'm going to drink again. That's really, that, and it is this vicious cycle that goes over and over and over again. And I have no way to turn it off. And so I really, truly believe right now in this moment, like, I am only here by the grace of a power greater than myself. And I'm so grateful for that. And so when I first entered the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a teenager. I was the age of my son right now, which is such a trip. It is so weird. I can't even believe I'm old enough to say I have a 15-year-old son, but I do, and I am. And it's awesome. And it's crazy, like terrifying in moments, because, I was 15 and I was 12, my daughter's age. And it feels like a blink ago. But it's a true honor to be their mom. So thinking about, being my son's age and going to treatment for the first time, that's exactly what it was. What got me to the place where my experiences, I asked my mom to take me for an assessment, because my mom, and I'm going to back up a minute. When I was 11, that's when I remember taking my first drink on my own, not given alcohol from a family member, but like actually picking up a drink and drinking. And I remember I was at somebody's house with my bestie at the time, and a kid offered us vodka. And I took a drink, and it was as if it was water, like that's really how I felt. Like I I took another drink. And then I just kept drinking and waiting for that effect to take place. And to the point where I just drank into myself into a blackout. And I got in the biggest trouble. My mom went, she has this really strong instinct and came looking for us. And this is way before, right? Cell phones. And I mean, way before. This is like in the late 80s. And she came looking for me and found me and pulled me out of there and put me on restriction for a month. And, I had had that happen before, but this time I remember I was going to be on restriction for the entire month. There was no way I was getting out of this one. And about halfway through that month, it was Christmas break, and she came to me and said, okay, I'm going to let you off. I have good news and I have bad news. And I was like, okay, and I'm going to let you off restriction early. And I was like, okay, what's the catch? And she's like, and we're moving to Seattle, like this week. And so you get to say goodbye to your friends. And I just remember being so angry. I was so pissed. I mean, just like this fire in my belly. And I've had that feeling several times since, but like, just, oh my God, she must hate me. And really, I mean, at the time, San Diego was doing exactly what Seattle, recently did, just growing into a bigger city. There were a lot of people moving into San Diego, and, there weren't a lot of jobs. And my stepfather was from the Northwest. So in their mind, it made sense to just let's move back to the Northwest into Seattle and Washington. And so, that gave me an excuse to go out and really get good and drunk, that to say goodbye to my friends. And I got in an even bigger trouble. And the whole ride up here, we were in one of those big moving trucks, and I was hungover, and I had my Rottweiler at my feet, and she was breathing on me. And that was kind of the big joke, like, she's breathing on me. And I love dogs. They're like we have 3 now. So I absolutely adore her. And still, like Sadie Lou, she was our family pet and dog. And but I was just mad at her, and I was mad at my mom, and I was mad at my stepdad. I was mad at everybody, the entire world. And I swore when I got up to wherever I was going, which I just knew it was cold. And I didn't even care. I just was like, I'm just going to check out. I'm going to do whatever, whenever. And that's exactly what I did, and I would go into the woods and I would smoke weed. And I hated it. I hated it. And it just is not my thing at all. And I'm really crazy when I did that, but I just kept doing it because it was just like a numb out, and whatever I could get my hands on, that's what I would do. And the reputation of the California girl went down real quick, real fast. And I didn't care. And I remember hearing about somebody went to treatment at school, and they went and got an assessment. So I was like, okay. And I asked my mom for an assessment, and she said, what on earth are you talking about? And I was like, I need to go to treatment to get an assessment. And I thought, well, I will just get away from them for 30 days or so. And little did I know, really, the inkling in me was I couldn't control amounts, right? Like I knew that, but I got to treatment, which is now Lakeside Milam. At the time, it was Kirkland Care Unit. And I went through detox, even though I thought it was ridiculous because I didn't need to detox. And I probably at that age maybe didn't. But I remember being in this treatment center and same type of feeling, like where I'm connecting with you all. I'm connecting with a group of people that I've never connected with. I never found that in school. I didn't, the only real connection that I had was like my grandpa drinking kamikazes or my family, and so it was very attractive, and I stayed. And I know that my life had become unmanageable, absolutely 100%. So I stayed, and I stayed sober, and I joined a home group. which was up in Linwood called DRU North. And a couple years into sobriety, I joined that group. And I started going through the steps. I had a couple sponsors that taught me how to be on time, and they taught me how to show up and be respectful and not sass all the time. It was really hardcore sponsorship. It was kind of like really, I felt like my sponsor didn't like me, kind of like my mom, to be honest. And she was really scary. And so, and it was kind of a just like, it wasn't really the person. I didn't really want to be that person, but I knew that I couldn't drink again. I knew that. And so I stayed sober long enough to go through beauty school. I left high school. I got my GED and I joined a beauty school in Federal Way, the Gene Juarez South campus, which I was 17 at the time. And I graduated and I got hired at the Four Seasons Olympic Hotel. And that was my first job out of beauty school, out of Gene Juarez in the advanced training. And so, my career started and I was sober and I was young and I had a home group and we had lots of fun and there was tons of fellowship and people were just talking about the big book all the time and how they were working the steps. And so, and I can relate with all of the living part of alcoholism at the time. And I had an inkling that I was an alcoholic, but I couldn't relate with the yets, right? I couldn't relate with all the things that all the old people is what I thought we're talking about. And I was like, and everybody would just say, oh, it's so great that you're so young and you found Alcoholics Anonymous and you're sober and look at you and here. And people started asking me to sponsor them. And I got, I got a new sponsor before that. And went through the steps again and had I was really, really, really hard, just like real regimented. And because of that sponsorship that I had earlier. And I remember I met this woman and she was super, super loving and really soft and everybody wanted what she had. And I hated her for that. I was just like, oh, but I loved her, right? She had this really incredible way of loving every single person that she met like equally and making us all feel like we were her favorite. And I just was so ego driven. I couldn't actually say, will you be my sponsor? Even though she had been sponsoring me probably long before I ever, I ever even really knew or that I needed a spiritual awakening. And I watched what she did, and she asked a home group member to sponsor her. And, and it was a guy. And it's a home group member that, is my peer, Kenny D. And a lot of you know him, I'm sure. I know a lot of you do know him. And I realized tonight coming to this talk that normally I would talk with him before I got up to speak at the podium. And so instead I reached out to one of my girlfriends, a original sponsor of this sobriety, and just sent her a message and asked her to say a prayer in honor of Kenny and me. And so back to that experience, I knew that I needed to have something happen, or I just didn't like the way that I was living. And I was really attracted to this woman's message. And what happened was, before she could actually take me through the work, she got sick. And she ended up dying, passing away of AIDS. And but the beautiful thing about her is that she taught me how to love. She taught me so much and how to ask for help and just be humble. and that it was okay to have a new experience, and that I didn't need to know exactly what that experience was going to look like. In fact, I shouldn't know. That I know so much that I know everything, and I need to set everything I think I know aside. And that's exactly what I did. And that's when I asked Kenny to sponsor me. And he took me through the book, and I had that experience. And it was just like what I'm doing right now. He was the vessel. And it was really about me and my relationship with a higher power. And I got to learn all about the history of AA, and being like, I got to go actually to Akron, Ohio. I was asked, a lot of it had to do with Kenny, I'm sure. And I got to go to the original inner group and the history that you shared about, Steve, in the beginning of the meeting tonight. Like, that stuff is so awesome. And I love Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, just like you said, Carolyn, like, I love it so much. And I think it's an absolute miracle that two men back in the 30s and this meeting back in the 40s, that I can actually pay it respect and relate to, knowing that I got to find the face of hopelessness or I'm going to drink again, you know? And it wasn't after I had a spiritual experience with Kenny that I had stayed sober. I just like a lot of us, I fell in love and got married a couple times, but I got married to a man who I met in AA, and shortly after we were married, I came home and he was drunk, and I don't know. I want to say I was probably about 10 or 11 years sober at the time. And I think he was 5 or 6 years from what I thought. But he had drank himself into oblivion, to the point, like, it was like a fifth of vodka a day. And he was hiding it in the bushes. And this was just a few weeks after we got married. And, we were established. We were part of like major amazing AA, you know. I I fell in love. I got married. I thought, like, I've got my career booming. Everything's happening. Everything's going, and then boom, you know. And I was in denial when I first saw him on the sofa when I got home. I was just like, what's wrong with you? I brought home Palomino. Like, I have Gorgonzola French fries here. And I was just got off work and I was so excited. And he was just like laid out on the sofa and could barely speak. And I got into the shower, and I just started weeping, just crying with the realization that, oh my God, my husband's drunk. And yeah. Oof. And that started a couple-year journey of trying to get him sober and going through detox. And that was when I was asked to go to Akron, Ohio. You know, God has such a huge sense of humor. At least, I mean, my God does. It's like, yeah, your husband's drunk and you're completely falling apart. Let's have you be of service and try and keep you sober, you know? And so there I go, off to Akron, Ohio. And I brought my husband along because who I thought needed it the most was him, but really it was me. And at the time, I had no idea that it was us, right? And I got to lead. What? Nah. But I did. I got to lead a spiritual retreat, and I got to, lead some meditations, and I started getting asked to speak, and things were happening in this way that I was like, this just isn't right. This is not the story that I'm here to tell. Like, how do I talk about a drunk husband? I mean, wow, looking back at that, just even tonight, thinking about that and talking about that, how do I not talk about a drunk husband? Like, of course I'm going to marry a drunk. Well, hello? Like, that's who I attract, right? That's who I am. So, yeah, lo and behold, the resentment overshadowed my spiritual awakening. And I believed that I needed to order a legal drink. And that's exactly what I did. And then some. And I too have an experience with drugs, but really my thing is alcohol. Drugs support my alcoholism. They keep me awake and they keep me going so that I don't black out quite as quickly as I do when I'm not doing drugs. So, yeah, that lasted about 2 years, and I hit a huge bottom. I know exactly what it's like to kick cold turkey, and it's not fun. I flatlined in Miami, and it's a miracle that I made it back to Seattle. And I ended up in a all women's treatment center. And who did I call but Kenny? And the best part about my sponsor is absolutely he will never come and bail me out. Ever, like my parents would, right? My parents will drive from here to there to get me out of the shadiest places. And when I need help, it needs to be me that asks for help. It needs to be me that checks myself into detox. It needs to be me that goes to AA meetings, to treatment. And so that's what I did. And I got a home group, and I worked the steps again, and I got sober, and I was speaking at an engagement like this one in the basement of a church. And I was 2 years sober at the time. And the man sitting in the back of the room in the pew is now my husband. And I knew that there was something seriously wrong with that guy, because he was still single and he was so handsome. And yes. And so, yeah, and I forgot to say that I divorced the one that couldn't get sober. And so, and that was all a setup for me to drink, really. That's all it was. It was just a setup. And so, yeah, I fell in love again, and I ran away from him for a good 6 months. I was trying to stay sober. I was down in Belltown, working at a hair salon, living in the same building that I was working in, starting to make amends to my clients and to society, and showing up and being on time again. And then I fell in love, and by the grace of God, had two beautiful kids. And it's all kind of convoluted, and it doesn't really matter, because what happened is I fell under another lie that I was now going to be a mommy drinker, and that I was going to be able to control my drinking once again. And there it goes, and this time I married an incredible enabler, and thank God for him, because I think I'm alive, to be honest with you, and our family's alive today because of him. And it took COVID to get me sober. It took removing every single person, place, thing, job, friend, boyfriend, husband, parent, sponsor, to get me sober, because I had nobody to blame but myself. And I was sitting in my backyard alone, drinking endless amounts of sparkling wine, because that's what I like to drink, is sparkling wine. And if I was going to get good and drunk, I would pour myself a couple shots of the hard stuff. That's what I thought. I thought the wine was my water and the hard stuff was my drunk. And I was completely fooling myself. But deep down inside, I would have these moments where I would look at my husband, or I would look at myself in the mirror, and I would just go, I got to get sober. And thank God I was able to pick up the phone and first text and then call. And thank God there's a solution here. And I have not talked enough about that. But the solution is working the steps, having a spiritual experience, and staying awake today. Today, staying recovered and not being tempted to believe what I have fallen into a zillion times, the lie that I can drink like a normal person. And the only way that I'm able to do that is by carrying the message, like what I'm doing right now, and helping another alcoholic. I want to just read quickly of how it works, chapter 5 of the big book, because it's important that I read what was printed. It says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. And I was that person for so long. I'm the one that separated myself from the solution. It wasn't because the solution wasn't available to me. It was because I couldn't thoroughly follow the path. I didn't want to, and I wasn't willing. And as soon as I became willing to thoroughly follow the path and do things that are not always convenient, right? Like showing up and being the face of Alcoholics Anonymous and saying, I love AA. And I love the fact that I was going to die a drunk. And the only reason that I'm awake, a sober person, and just a person in society is because of this spiritual experience that was literally laid at my feet over and over and over again. And I continued to shun. And thank God I accepted that. And thank God so many of you continue to believe in me and continue to ask me to do things like this. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we see how our experience can benefit others, right? And that feeling of uselessness and self-pity starts to disappear. And I can start looking people in the eye as I call them and knock and say, hey, can I schedule an appointment with you because I owe you an apology for the behavior and for the money. That stuff is still happening today, and it hasn't. It's a work in progress, but the willingness is there, and I don't always know how things are going to work out, and sometimes I doubt it. Right? I'd hardly be human if I didn't. But that's why I have great sponsorship today who shows me by acting, by doing, by being. And I just act and do and be. And I pray and hope that, the money keeps showing up and the willingness keeps showing up and the people keep showing up for me to help and for me to be helped by. And so far, it's worked, and thank goodness. I think I'm out of time, way over. So thank you for your patience, and I just thank you all from the bottom of my heart for my life and for my sobriety. Thanks.